I think when you love something so much and when you're touched and moved by something like as deeply as I was by this book, it just kind of comes naturally.
Yeah.
It comes from the heart, hits the heart. That's kind of what kept me going throughout this whole process, is just knowing that we're working on something special that has the potential to impact millions of lives.
Blake Lively is moving through discovery with absolute confidence, convinced she's building the flawless case, pushing motion after motion to compel, and on the surface it looks like an unstoppable winning streak as the judge keeps granting her requests. But don't be fooled. Judges in employment disputes, discrimination battles, and potential victim scenarios often lean toward allowing broad discovery, not because the plaintiff is destined to win, but because they don't want to appear as if they're blocking someone's chance to prove abuse or retaliation. Yes, Blake is being handed the discovery she demands, but securing documents doesn't guarantee uncovering the smoking gun that could actually save her case. What truly matters is whether her claims survive the brutal tests of law, motions to dismiss, summary judgment, or the unforgiving scrutiny of a jury trial. She believes her story of harassment, retaliation, and a deliberate smear campaign designed to destroy her reputation is airtight. But here's the twist: Jed Wallace. With his legal team's razor-sharp precision, Wallace is executing a meticulous strategy, filing motions to dismiss that chip away at her accusations while carefully dismantling her narrative piece by piece. They're not just attacking her claims against him, they're exposing cracks in her entire case, undermining her credibility at every angle. And here's the kicker: Jed Wallace isn't a Hollywood mogul, not a producer tied to the film, not her employer. He's something far more dangerous to her legal war, a defendant with nothing to lose, and attorneys determined to shred her perfect case illusion. And this is exactly where things get even more intense, because while Blake is focused on proving her story, Jed's lawyers are playing a completely different game, one built on strategy, patience, and quiet attacks that most people don't even notice at first. They are filing responses that look ordinary on the surface but are cleverly designed to weaken her claims little by little, so by the time she believes she has a strong case, it may already be collapsing underneath her. What Blake didn't expect is how skilled they are at using technical rules of the court, turning small details into powerful weapons that could block her from moving forward. Every hearing, every deadline, every document filed is part of a bigger plan to make her case fall apart before it even reaches a jury. And while Blake wants to tell a story of being wronged, Jed's side is determined to rewrite that story into one where her claims simply don't survive. In federal court in New York, a powerhouse PR consultant turned legal strategist is methodically dismantling her claims with a precision that leaves no room for doubt, line by line, allegation by allegation, not through theatrics but with ruthless clarity and cold legal firepower. His team's latest filing cuts deep, declaring her 2-paragraph rebuttal in a sprawling 31-page brief a hollow attempt that fails to even scratch the surface, a tone echoed relentlessly throughout his defense. Clinical, unflinching, and devastatingly direct. In this video, we're breaking down how he's unraveling her retaliation theory, why her shaky reliance on California law collapses under New York's stricter standards, and how even her own sworn testimony betrays her narrative, exposing cracks she never anticipated, with quotes lifted straight from his filings that reveal a strategy as sharp as it is relentless. At the core of her allegations lies the claim that Wallace and his allies waged what she calls a retaliation campaign, accusing them of deliberately spreading whispers that painted her as rude, mocked her promotional efforts as tone-deaf, and framed her as dismissive of domestic violence awareness. All while she insists this wasn't organic backlash but a calculated takedown engineered to annihilate her credibility before she ever dared to accuse Justin Baldwin publicly. In her telling, Wallace and his co-defendants conspired to bury her reputation, to strip her voice of power, to ensure that when her truth finally surfaced, it would be smothered under doubt, skepticism, and disbelief, an audacious theory steeped in drama, but one the court filings suggest may be crumbling beneath the weight of precision law. The courtroom battle doesn't stop there, because what's unfolding next is even more striking. His lawyers are now pointing to contradictions buried deep within her statements, showing how timelines don't align and how certain claims shift depending on the audience she's addressing. They argue this isn't just inconsistency, it's evidence that her version of events was shaped to fit a narrative rather than truth. The filings also highlight how third-party witnesses under oath have given testimony that weakens her accusations, creating a pattern of doubt that the defense is exploiting with sharp precision. Beyond the legal tactics, the case is also raising larger questions about the risks of public image, how powerful narratives can be weaponized, and whether reputations can be destroyed faster in court or in the media. For the defense, every detail matters, and piece by piece, They are attempting to strip her claims of credibility until nothing solid remains. The reality here is that retaliation laws aren't crafted for speculation but for proven, concrete actions causing measurable workplace harm to Blake, and she cannot demonstrate any adverse employment impact against her. Wallace's brief stresses that every thread of her argument stems entirely from reputational damage, citing New York law which classifies claims rooted in injury to reputation as defamation whenever damages flow solely from reputational effect, making her allegations indistinguishable from defamation itself. He dismantles her framing by highlighting that she labels it retaliation, yet what she truly asserts is reputational injury, which falls squarely under defamation, and throughout her response she fails to escape his invocation of the defamation exception, a fatal blow to her theory. So what exactly is this exception? In New York, if a claim is fundamentally about reputational harm, it cannot be disguised under alternate legal theories to dodge defamation's strict requirements, such as its short statute of limitations, the obligation to pinpoint precise false statements, and, for public figures like Blake, the near-impossible hurdle of proving actual malice. She tries to package it as reputational harm rather than defamation by calling it a smear campaign, but his legal team declares unequivocally that her allegations against Wallace and his co-defendants sound undeniably in defamation, stripping her of jurisdiction. Even her framework of false light, aiding, abetting, and conspiracy collapses if the essence of her complaint is defamation, and the damning reality is that her own written words circle back, again and again, to reputational harm, reinforcing the very foundation his defense is using to unravel her case piece by piece. Now the turning point becomes even sharper, because Wallace's lawyers are not only focusing on the law but also exposing how Blake's narrative struggles to survive under close inspection. They point out that her arguments lack the concrete foundation every strong legal case needs, and instead rely heavily on emotional framing without substantial evidence. The filings stress that when a claim is stripped of dramatic language, what matters are facts, timelines, and proof, and that is exactly where her position weakens. Witness statements contradict parts of her story, digital records don't fully align with her claims, and the supposed campaign against her looks more like public opinion rather than organized sabotage. This matters, because in high-profile lawsuits, separating personal perception from verifiable damage is everything. The defense strategy is to show the court that while her story might sound powerful, it cannot withstand the strict standards of New York law. Piece by piece, they're dismantling the foundation she's trying so hard to build. She's essentially wrapped her entire case in employment law when, at its core, it's defamation disguised as workplace retaliation, which is why Wallace's attorneys ridicule her response as nearly non-existent. 2 paragraphs in a 31-page brief, offering no real counter to the defamation issue, and as they told the judge, her silence speaks volumes. Her second major theory leans on California's Fair Employment and Housing Act, yet that statute doesn't stretch beyond California's borders, with courts repeatedly ruling it applies only if the plaintiff lives, works, and suffers harm there. By her own admission, the alleged harassment unfolded in New Jersey before she filed in New York, and now she's straining to pull California law into a case with no California ties, a move his lawyers immediately attacked, telling the judge that her admission is fatal not just to her claims against Wallace but to the entire case. They pressed further, noting she alleges no misconduct in California, only New York-based acts, making her reliance on FEA legally hollow. That collapse means she's wielding the wrong law in the wrong state, exposing a strategic blunder known as forum shopping, and when she tried to salvage it by arguing the retaliation decision was made in California because of Wayfair's presence there, the defense dismantled it as another desperate attempt to anchor her story where it doesn't belong. What makes the situation even more damaging for Blake is how the defense is now showing the court that her choice of law was not only weak but deliberately misleading. They argue that by trying to pull California statutes into a New York case, she revealed that she was searching for a softer legal ground, one that could give her more protection than New York law ever would. Judges generally do not look kindly on this kind of tactic, because it suggests the plaintiff is not confident in the strength of her claims. The defense further stressed that if every celebrity could shop around for the friendliest state laws, the entire justice system would collapse into chaos. They reminded the court that the real issue is whether her story stands under the state where events actually happened, not in the place she believes will give her an advantage. This makes her case appear shaky, ungrounded, and strategically flawed, giving the defense another major upper hand. Her lawyers tried to argue that since Wallace was recruited by California-based counsel and his invoices were processed through California companies, the state's laws should govern, but then she asked a New York court to hold jurisdiction, a contradiction that his reply tore apart with surgical precision. He emphasized that none of his alleged conduct, whether the supposed media blitz, the public statements, or the strategic decisions, occurred in California, and he outright denied engaging in any of it. The defense hammered this further, stating that even if Blake's employer in California made discriminatory decisions, there's no claim Wallace knew about them or acted with retaliatory intent, leaving her FEA argument to wither instantly. What makes this remarkable is how methodically his team is dismantling her framework, laying out a blueprint that could easily be replicated by other Wayfair defendants seeking summary judgment. Her retaliation theory doesn't just falter, it collapses under scrutiny, because even beyond the California hurdle, the logic of her claim disintegrates. She alleges Wallace and others spread damaging stories portraying her as rude, tone-deaf, and insensitive, yet without direct evidence linking him to those narratives, the foundation of her case is vanishing in real time. What follows is even more damaging for her argument, because the defense shifts attention to the heart of retaliation law itself, showing that her accusations don't line up with how the law actually works. They argue that retaliation requires proof of a clear, harmful action tied directly to her employment, yet all she offers are claims of reputation damage, which belong under defamation, not employment statutes. The filings highlight that her story is built more on perception than fact, and courts are not swayed by feelings, they want evidence. Even if people in the industry criticized her or questioned her behavior, that doesn't automatically prove a coordinated attack led by Wallace. The defense is using this gap to show the judge that she has confused public opinion with legal wrongdoing, and that confusion is weakening her position dramatically. Step by step, her narrative is being stripped down until what remains looks less like a retaliation case and more like a fragile attempt to reframe criticism. The backlash painted her as rude, tone-deaf, and dismissive of domestic violence, yet she insists this was pure retaliation, not for anything public she said, but because she dared to speak privately, before ever stepping forward. According to her, they moved first to silence her, to undermine her credibility in case she ever went public. His attorneys cut straight to the point. That isn't retaliation, it's speculation, because retaliation requires an actual protected act and a concrete adverse response, not hypotheticals. Under oath, her own words unraveled further. She admitted she couldn't identify a single article or statement from Wallace that harmed her, not even one. For someone alleging relentless media attacks that destroyed her reputation, that concession is devastating. His lawyers deliver it sharply. Her claims are nothing more than defamation in disguise, and if she can't even name a defamatory remark, what remains? Nothing. What confuses me most about Blake's case is the glaring contradiction in her narrative, how she says she was harassed, yet how she responded. I imagine myself in that position, and instinct says distance, create space, protect yourself, stay far from those inflicting harm. But she didn't. Instead, after claiming harassment, she pushed for more involvement, demanded greater creative control, pulled herself closer to the very project, and by extension, the very people, including Justin, she accused. That doesn't reflect harassment, it undermines it entirely. What makes this situation even more complex is the way Blake's actions kept contradicting the story she was building. After claiming she was treated unfairly, instead of stepping back, she positioned herself even closer to the spotlight, making choices that placed her directly in the center of the same environment she labeled as harmful. This created a wave of confusion, not only in court but also among the public, because people began questioning whether her version of events matched her behavior. Her opponents used this against her, arguing that if she truly felt unsafe, her actions would have reflected caution, not deeper involvement. At the same time, her push for more power and influence on the project painted a different picture, one that critics described as opportunistic rather than protective. That inconsistency made her claims appear weaker, almost like the story kept shifting with every new turn. And in cases like this, contradictions can be more damaging than silence itself. And it forces the question, was this ever truly about harassment, or was it a calculated bid for leverage, a way to weaponize allegations as bargaining chips for control of the film? If this battle reaches trial, that's exactly what a jury will have to weigh. His attorneys portray the entire ordeal as reputational warfare, not retaliation, emphasizing that Blake never cited any act by Wallace that could even qualify as harassment under FEA. They stress in their filings that even if her employer's actions were discriminatory, there's no evidence Wallace knew or intended retaliation, making him an outsider dragged into chaos he never created. In reality, Blake herself engineered this mess, forcing his team to untangle layers of state laws, federal rules, and FEA standards across jurisdictions, all because she forum shopped to exploit legal loopholes. She filed in New York instead of California precisely because New York allowed secret subpoenas, which is how she seized Jen Abel's phone without notice, something California law would have blocked. That maneuver alone exposes her strategy, a textbook case of forum shopping. Her pleadings reveal Wallace was implicated only through California insiders, while her own brief admits the supposed conspiracy's heart wasn't even in New York. His lawyers cite precedent clearly. Courts reject jurisdiction when a non-domiciliary is cast merely as an agent of local players. And in a striking twist, Wallace uses her very words against her, quoting her admission that a significant part of the so-called scheme unfolded far from New York's reach. What makes this even more dramatic is how Blake's legal strategy started to look less like a fight for justice and more like a carefully planned gamble. Instead of sticking to a single path, she kept shifting her moves, creating confusion not only for the court but also for everyone following the case. Each new filing seemed to add another layer of mystery, almost as if she was testing how far the system could be stretched in her favor. Critics began pointing out that these tactics didn't reflect someone seeking protection, but someone seeking advantage, turning every claim into another attempt to gain control. Supporters, however, argued that her persistence showed determination and courage, that she was fighting against powerful forces determined to silence her. This clash of perspectives is exactly what keeps people glued to the story. Because in battles like this, truth and perception often collide, and the outcome depends on which side the jury and the public ultimately believe. The alleged retaliatory scheme, according to her own filings, was orchestrated entirely by California insiders, yet she turned to New York subpoenas, filed in New York, and pinned the blame on people rooted in California. That maneuver, classic forum shopping, is now dismantling her case piece by piece, because her deliberate choice to bypass California's stricter laws has left her arguments riddled with fatal flaws, not only against Wallace but also against Wayfair. Wallace's legal team has emerged as a powerhouse, strategically dismantling her every claim with precision. They aren't just challenging jurisdiction, they're striking at the core of her entire narrative, exposing weaknesses that could collapse her case before trial. They point out that her agency argument is upside down, that nothing meaningful happened in New York, and yet she demands New York law apply, even while citing California's FEA. Using her own words against her, they argue she concedes defeat, because courts don't let outsiders exploit California statutes. On retaliation, they slice deeper, revealing she never engaged in a protected act before claiming retaliation, leaving a gaping hole in her story. And when it comes to intent, the very heart of aiding and abetting, they cut sharply, stating there's not a single allegation that Wallace or his team even knew the conduct occurred, shattering the foundation of her claims. What makes this battle even more shocking is how every step Blake takes seems to tighten the trap around her own claims. Instead of proving her position stronger, the evidence she gathered is being turned against her, making the courtroom feel less like her stage and more like her downfall. Each argument from the defense is crafted like a weapon, exposing gaps she never expected to be questioned. The more her lawyers try to spin the narrative, the more contradictions rise to the surface, leaving observers wondering if this was ever truly about justice or simply about control. People following the case can't ignore how the timelines, the filings, and even the strategies don't line up with her accusations. It leaves the impression of a story built on shaky ground, one that risks collapsing under the weight of its own twists. And in high-profile cases like this, perception can become as dangerous as proof itself. He argues there was nothing discriminatory, no intent of retaliation or harassment at all, and he delivers that point with precision. Using fewer pages than Blake's 31, his filings are sharper, more surgical, every word slicing another layer off her claims until the framework collapses. The brilliance lies not in length but in impact, with arguments crafted like a scalpel cutting straight to the heart. The judge may not need to decide every jurisdictional angle, because Wallace has given multiple, clear pathways for dismissal, each one devastating to her position. The likelihood of this case surviving his motion to dismiss feels slim, almost impossible. Her retaliation claim rests on speculation, with no proof she engaged in any protected activity, no HR complaint, no direct act, nothing concrete. Even the agreement she cites fails to outline specific misconduct. Wallace insists her FEA claims are nothing more than veiled defamation, transparent and hollow. And worst of all, her sworn testimony admits she cannot name a single act by Wallace that caused harm, leaving her accusations exposed, unsupported, and fatally weak. The real twist comes when you look at how much weight the court is placing on credibility, because in high-stakes cases like this, trust can make or break everything. Blake's shifting storylines and inconsistent evidence are starting to look less like mistakes and more like cracks in the foundation of her claims. Every time she tries to strengthen her side, it ends up exposing a weakness the defense is quick to use against her. What's fascinating is how this turns the trial into more than just a legal fight. It becomes a battle of perception, where the public and the jury both want to know who is telling the truth. If her words don't line up with her actions, that shadow of doubt could erase every advantage she thought she had. And once doubt takes over, it's not just her case at risk. It's her entire reputation, her career, and even her legacy that could face collapse in front of millions watching closely. He doesn't just challenge her claims, he obliterates them, like setting off dynamite and watching the entire structure collapse in seconds. His legal team drives it home to the judge. Since her allegations boil down to defamation, jurisdiction cannot stand, and they seal it with the same cutting blow they began with. That her weak, two-paragraph effort in a 31-page brief to dodge the defamation exception isn't a legal defense, it's barely even a response. That's not strategy, it's surrender, and it's a warning flare that her entire case is imploding. Wallace isn't merely protecting himself, he's dismantling her narrative piece by piece, while handing Wayfair the ultimate playbook to crush her with a motion for summary judgment. By filing in New York, where the defamation exception is ironclad, instead of California, she made a catastrophic error, and his attorneys turned it into a masterpiece. I left this briefing with absolute conviction. Her wins in discovery mean nothing, because a collapsing case cannot survive trial. Share your thoughts below. Do you believe the judge will embrace these arguments, and could Wayfair ride this wave to victory too? Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. More explosive updates are coming. 202,967